Hi, I'm Kerry Kennedy, president of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm honored to join this distinguished panel because, especially considering the long road that brought me to join you, it all started in 1951, 1 year after the modern Republic of India came into being with the adoption of the Constitution, when then Senator John F. Kennedy visited India, where he met Prime Minister Nehru. He respected the Prime Minister as one of the great political leaders of the 20th century and was deeply moved by the commitment of the Indian people to shuffle off the coils of colonial rule. 9 years later, during President Kennedy's first inaugural address, he cited Nehru's soaring idealism. Under the Kennedy administration, India became one of the largest recipients of U.S. aid in the world. Along with that aid, Jack sent his most impressive asset, Aunt Jackie, who also fell for that magical land. After Uncle Jack died, knowing how much he loved the country, Aunt Jackie looked to India for a model of contemporary architecture for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. Jackie shared her experiences with my cousin John, who visited India when we were at Brown together, and he in turn shared them with me. So I was thrilled when I finally fulfilled a lifelong dream to go to India in 1986. I spent the summer traveling from Calcutta to Kashmir, to Mumbai, to Delhi, from big cities to small villages, visiting the homes of master craftsmen who were creating designs for an exhibition at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York. None of my fondest memories would have been possible had it not been for the freedoms and fundamental human rights guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. My connection with India has continued over the years, and it has been an important part of our work at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. This organization was founded by my family and friends in 1968 to carry forward Daddy's unfinished work on social justice. We protect civic space by defending fundamental freedoms to express dissent, hold leaders accountable, and speak truth to power, on behalf of journalists, opposition groups, and human rights defenders. We are greatly concerned that the human rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Indian Constitution are under threat, and we have recognized the work of brave human rights activists working in India to uphold the rights enshrined in the Constitution. We presented the 1995 RFK Human Rights Award to Kailash Satyarthi for his courageous work emancipating children from slavery and his success passing legislation to end systemic child servitude. Kailash estimates that there are 60 million child laborers in India, many of whom are forced into hazardous work. They've been forced into child labor due to poverty, lack of education opportunities, and high unemployment rates. COVID-19 has exacerbated child labor and child trafficking as children, economically disadvantaged families, and children from rural areas have been unable to attend school. Although India has ratified all key international conventions related to child labor, the government must work on implementation and enforcement to protect the rights of children. Then, in 2000, we presented the RFK Human Rights Award to Martin Makwan, a Dalit human rights activist in Gujarat, for his courageous work on Dalit rights and to eliminate caste-based discrimination. Although the government officially banned the caste system in 1950, the caste someone is born into still determines all too often their social status, job, marriage, and even the respect they receive from others. The quality of life of the Dalit population is worse than that of the overall Indian population in many areas, including life expectancy, access to health care, education attainability, access to drinking water, and housing. Dalit women and girls are particularly vulnerably situated, as it is estimated that 10 Dalit women and girls are raped every single day. Unfortunately, authorities make little to no arrests for crimes against Dalits, and the government has not acted to end the surge of violence, rape, and murders against this group of people. And then I was thrilled to be a judge for the Reebok Human Rights Award when it was presented to the courageous leader and my dear friend, Kurum Parvez, in 2006. 2 years earlier, Kurum was monitoring parliamentary elections in Lolab when a car bomb blew up his vehicle, killing the driver and killing Kurum's human rights colleague. Kurum's leg was amputated, and he nearly lost his life. Rather than deterring him, the horror of that trauma led to Kurum redoubling his efforts to monitor human rights abuses in Kashmir and hold the government accountable for those abuses. Again and again, he was harassed, followed, spied upon, threatened with death, unlawfully arrested, faced false criminal charges, and more. As a founding member of the Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, Kurum's work has been fundamental to documenting human rights abuses, providing legal aid, and advocating against human rights violations in the region. His groundbreaking work to uncover the presence of 2,300 unmarked single or mass graves in the region in 2009 called the world's attention to the seriousness of the abuses. But that also has increased the attacks and harassment against him. In September 2016, Kurum was prevented from boarding a flight to Geneva to attend the Human Rights Council, where he was scheduled to submit a paper on human rights violations in Kashmir and attend a European session in Brussels. The next day, he was arrested at his home and detained for 76 days. He was finally released when the Jammu and Kashmir High Court quashed his detention, calling the arrest illegal and arbitrary. In October 2020, Kurum's house was searched by the National Investigation Agency, along with the houses and offices of several other human rights defenders. These raids were conducted in an investigation into the fundraising of NGOs in India and abroad who work in Jammu and Kashmir. Kurum has always worked at grave peril. Most recently, on November 22nd, 2021, the National Investigation Agency and police raided and searched Kurum's home and the JKCCS office in Srinagar for 14 hours, confiscated his cell phone and his laptop, and detained Kurum for what they claimed to be routine questioning. His family was later told that he had been arrested. He was charged under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, a capricious anti-terrorism law that has been criticized across the globe and makes being freed on bail extremely difficult. He has been detained ever since, and if convicted, he could face up to 14 years in prison or even the death penalty. All this simply for pointing out human rights violations committed by government officials. I have known Kurum for 16 years. He is a good friend. He has stayed with our family at the Kennedy compound in Massachusetts. He has vacationed with my family in Kashmir. I'll never forget spending a day with him and my 3 children on going around on Lake Dal and then looking up at those magnificent Himalaya mountains and spending a day in the beautiful, beautiful Shalimar Gardens, an experience that none of us will ever forget. And Kurum talking about his love for India, his love for Kashmir, for the people, for the history, for the beauty of the place that God created. Kurum's most recent arrest is a prime example of the crackdown on civic space in India and across the globe, where regimes target journalists and lawyers and human rights defenders who play a critical role of holding governments accountable for human rights abuses. for this courageous work in defense of democracy, transparency in the management of public affairs, and upholding the very rights governments are responsible for protecting under their own laws and under international obligations. Human rights defenders are threatened, brutalized, tortured, disappeared, and murdered by their own governments. More and more anti-terrorism laws are being used to target legitimate critics of regime abuse and stifle dissent. Instead of prosecuting those who document and expose human rights abuses, the Indian government should welcome these findings and hold the violators, particularly those in the security forces, accountable. Human rights work must not be criminalized. India must amend the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and ensure accountability for abuses. Robert Kennedy said, "The sharpest criticism often goes hand in hand with the deepest idealism and love of country." Human rights defenders and activists, like Karum Parvez, personify my father's words. They are all working for a better India. Thank you so much for your time, for your commitment, and for upholding the greatest values, the shared values of India and the United States. Thank you.